fans, welcome back to Room 237, and I'm finally getting to the last of, at least ones I own, 80 slasher films. Now, I do plan on picking up more and doing them as I get them, but for now, this is all that I have. There are now no more 80 slasher films, 70s proto-slashers, or anything that's been left aside, like how Chopping Mall was or Schizo was. But this has been set aside for a while because this got a newer DVD and Blu-ray release back in, I want to say September or October of last year. And I actually picked this up when it came out, but that was well into my Italian Giallo marathon, so it did get pushed aside. And well, I'll explain that after. But this is 1983's Mortuary, which that is as classic as a cover as you can get. I mean, even just the way it's drawn and colored. I mean, that's almost like a Goosebumps classic. Now, I've always heard the title Mortuary 1983 and thought it was a slasher film, which is why I wanted to pick it up so bad when I found out about his new release. And also because I could never find it prior. I know Scorpion Releasing did a limited edition back in 2014. And I really wanted to see it, loving 80 slasher films. But then shortly after I picked it up, I mean, I was reading the tagline, "Before your funeral, before you are buried, before you are covered with the last shovel full of dirt, be sure you are really dead. Mortuary, where nobody rests in peace." And then I read that it was more about like a cult, like a satanic cult. And it just looks like a zombie film. So I figured, well, maybe it's not a slasher film. And then recently I finally got around to watching it. And I was like, well, there is the cult aspect, but this definitely feels more like a slasher film. So then as I read and watched some interviews on it, everywhere calls it slasher. It is an 80s slasher film. So kind of tricked myself, but I can certainly see why people in 1983 and since would have been tricked, because even the original trailer, which this comes with, was just like a short clip of Michael Berryman, the horror icon, who was in the original Hills Have Eyes as Pluto. He's a gravedigger. And then this hand comes out and grabs him to get the title Mortuary. So the trailer would have made it seem like a zombie film or some sort of supernatural film. The cover, the tagline does. I mean, this definitely looks like a zombie movie. It was also known as Embalmed and Hall of the Dead, or Hall of Death, one of the two. I would say Embalmed probably fits more. But there are scenes in a mortuary. This makes sense as well. But that kind of also makes it does seem more like an undead themed film. So I do think Embalmed might have worked a little bit more. But, I mean, this still just looks like a wonderful poster. So it was directed by Howard Avidas, if I pronounced that correctly, who also wrote the film. And it does have a very good cast. I mean, not only do you get an early appearance of Bill Paxton, which apparently, and I'm not sure how true this is, I think this was filmed in and slated for a release in 81, maybe 82, but it was pushed to 83 for whatever reason, if that story is true. But and Bill Paxton is great in this. Like he always is. He's always fun to watch, especially in those 80s horror films. And he's not the kind of character he was in Butcher Baker Nightmare Maker, which was very much like Chet in Weird Science. You can definitely see sort of like the blooming psychopath that he would eventually play in like Near Dark, which it is kind of sad he didn't get a. I would have loved to see a movie about Bill Paxton, or with Bill Paxton as the lead with this kind of character. I think that would have been awesome. But also, Mary McDonough, David Wallace, could take them or leave them. I actually didn't think David Wallace was that good of an actor at all. But Linda Day George and Christopher George, who were husband and wife, they both appeared together in Pieces. Christopher George is always fun. I mean, he was also in, Pieces, uh, City of the Living Dead, Graduation Day. He was in the nature horror films Grizzly and Day of the Animals. I know she was in Pieces, and her performance in this was way better than in Pieces. I mean, she doesn't have like the bastard scene that she did in Pieces. In fact, when she has to act and be more emotional, she does do a much better job in this. The music was by John Kakavas, if I pronounced that correctly. And Gary, too blurry on that. This says a cinematography, which it doesn't. And yeah, even though this just came out in October, it's not like Arrow or Severin or anything like that. It's actually MVD Visual, who I've never heard of. Oh, David Wallace was in Humongous. That's where I've seen him, which I'm not the biggest fan of Humongous. That was one of the earliest slasher film reviews I did. It was a rant, and I do talk about how I could see the potential in that film, but sadly it still sucked. He does do a better job in this. Now, the whole story is centered around... You have this girl named Christy, played by Mary McDonough, whose father, it opens up, slow motion, this guy by the pool, he gets hit in the head with a bat, falls in the water. She sees him in the water, but I guess didn't see the attacker. And his death was ruled as an accident. Now, it's not said in caption, but it is mentioned that less than a month later, the events of the film take place. Now, her boyfriend, Greg, is played by David Wallace. It starts with him and his friend Josh. They go to this warehouse for a mortuary. Josh was fired by Christopher George, the owner or proprietor of the mortuary. So they go to the warehouse to steal tires for compensation. There they witness this satanic seance, and Josh is killed by a cloaked figure in black. And from then on, Christy starts to think that her father's death was not an accident. Perhaps they're coming after her. No one believes her. And she thinks she's going crazy. Or thinks people are trying to drive her crazy. And Greg knows about the seance, and he's kind of trying to help her out. They think there's a link between them. Now, I did enjoy this film. I actually thought this film was fun. I liked the story. I do wish Bill Paxton had a bigger role in it. I can see why someone might be disappointed in it, either thinking they're getting a zombie film and they don't, or going into it knowing that's a slasher film, because this is one of those slashers that is more focused on story and character rather than body count and effects, which you do get a number of those. I mean, go through my playlist. There's ones like Sweet 16, Death Valley, so many that are just so iced, so forgettable, and they try to focus on story and character. As far as ones that are not concerned with body count, I would say this is one of the better or more fun ones. I mean, on-screen deaths, you get 5 maybe, and that's including the killer. and you don't really get a whole lot of blood. I mean, which I the only blood you really see is when the killer gets killed. He probably has the bloodiest, but the killer's main weapon of choice, I actually think, is pretty clever. Seeing how it takes place around this a, a mortuary. Sorry, I'm stuttering so much. I'm not going to say who the killer is yet, but he uses a trocar, which is an instrument used in embalming. It's like this long needle with a handle that has a tube that comes out for all the fluids. So when he stabs someone, blood is just being drained out of the hose down by the handle. There might actually be 6 kills because I did just remember one. And the killer is cloaked in black and has like black and white Grim Reaper face paint. It's not a body count film. They're very few and far between. Most are more towards the end. It is more about Christy and Greg trying to figure out what's going on around them. As far as for who the killer is, some people call it a poorly written mystery. I don't think this is meant to be a mystery. It's pretty obvious who the killer is, not just because of the things we see or facts about the character that we hear before the reveal, but even when you finally get a good look at the killer, even with that black and white face paint, it's very obvious who it is. I honestly think it's one of those rare cases where the audience knows who it is, and it's just kind of like a slower build up to a reveal for the characters. I really don't see anyone being shocked or surprised as to who the killer is. This also isn't one of those slashers that's inspired by Giallo and plays out like Giallo. Even though Christy and Greg are trying to figure out what's going on, why things are being weird, why she feels targeted. There's no real red herrings or a misdirects. I mean, it feels pretty obvious from the beginning who the killer is. But I mean, the killer keeps going to Christy's house, talking to her through the window to open the window, or friggin' with the lights and the power. And I mean, that's pretty much the story. I can't really get into, well, also, her mother, at first, like the first half or so, the first act maybe, because of the whole thing with the seance, it does feel like the mother's in on something. Like, the seance is going to play a bigger part, it feels like. Like, this cult is going to play a much bigger part. And, like, the mother knows what's going on. Because remember, Christy mentions that, Dad's death was not an accident. I think it was murder. She kind of gets this look on her face, like, you know too much. But eventually we actually do get to sit in for one of these seances. If that's the correct way to use the plural. And it is revealed to the group from the husband's spirit that it wasn't an accident. So even the mother eventually finds out and kind of doesn't agree with Christy, but says, maybe there is more to it, but doesn't quite fully believe her, like, as far as someone being after her and it being more like a killer for a reason. But then after that, she gets killed. So I guess I'll get into spoilers if you really don't want to know who the killer is. But I mean, if you like 80s horror movies and 80s slashers, it is fun. It does have some cheesy acting. Bill Paxton is a blast to watch for the short scenes that he's in. But yeah, don't go into it thinking you're going to get like Friday the 13th. This is more of a story, character-driven slasher film. But I do think it works. This is one where I can say, I wasn't bored. the kills didn't have to be more spread out or more of them. I was invested in the story enough that warranted the low body count and the not very gory kills. Plus, if this came out in 1983, like, if it wasn't slated for 81, it was meant to come out in 83. It was towards the end of peak slasher years anyway, so maybe they want to do something a little different. But I did enjoy this film, and so yeah, as long as you don't expect Friday the 13th, like a huge body count blood fest, then I think you'll enjoy it. I mean, Bill Paxton is great. Awesome to see Christopher George, which this was his final film role. He did pass away the same year. But I'm going to get to spoilers now. Another plot point, which I didn't even mention who Bill Paxton was. He is the son of Christopher George, who goes to high school with Greg and Christy. He also works as an embalmer in his father's mortuary, even though he doesn't like it. He is fond of, classical music like Mozart, which first time we see him, he's showing off a Mozart record to Christy. He wants to play it for her. It showed even in his first scene that he has a crush on Christy, and she just kind of blows him off like, oh, he's a cute friend. And also, if you look closely, he's holding two Doors records also. He's holding Waiting for the Sun and Morrison Hotel in behind it. Doors, one of my all-time favorite bands. Have been for most of my life, so I thought that was kind of cool. And his mother recently committed suicide. That's another kind of plot point where the reason why they don't think he's weird or eccentric is maybe he's affected by his mother's suicide. But you come to find out that also Christy's father was the psychiatrist of Paul's, I believe it was Paul's mom, who he had sent her to like a mental hospital before. I think he treated Paul, and Paul went to him to ask for Christy's hand in marriage. He rebuffed him, or said no. Bill Paxton's the killer. That's why he killed her father. And I mean, it is obvious. Which if this was a giallo, when we got Paul's backstory, that would have been used as a misdirect. Like, okay, he's definitely the killer. But no, it's just to make you give us that obvious, think it's him, but oh, no, we're going to twist you. It's going to be this guy. But no, it's a slasher, so they're just giving us information about the killer. But even before that, when you get a good look at him, like when he's in the killer getup, he's like, Christy, open the window. You can tell it's him. Which is why I don't think this is much of a mystery. Hell, even in the beginning, when Greg and Josh go to the warehouse to steal tires, they see all these extra caskets. And there's an arm sticking out of one of them, and it's Paul's mother. And it doesn't say it, and I don't know if it's just part of Bill Paxton's kind of, how he kind of goes over the top sometimes in these earlier films. When he kills Christy's mom and stabs her in the stomach with the trocar, it is this fast editing between her stomach, her screaming, and Bill Paxton. And he's kind of like writhing. Almost looks like he's reached climax. I don't know if that's true. But I like his performance because for the first few scenes, he's this very, he's not Chet from Weird Science. He is this very meek, calm, shy kind of guy. But then we find out he's the killer. He goes from being really disturbed and crazy to almost doing like an early Jim Carrey type. And I mean, this is before Once Bitten. But like, because he does abduct Christy. He kills her mother, then takes her. brings her to the mortuary where he gives her a sedative. That's when Christopher George comes in, and when he sees that he has Christy and her mother and they're dead, he kills him. And his grand plan is that he got both Christy's parents, his own parents, Josh, who has clown makeup, I guess he's the entertainment or the witness, and then kill Christy so he can embalm her, preserve her, and then have this sort of wedding ceremony in front of everyone. I mean, when he's wheeling his mother around in the wheelchair, he's got this like early Jim Carrey like big smile and just kind of all excited. It's fun to watch. He really is. And he does get to play his Mozart record. He's like trying to conduct with all the bodies in front of him. So it kind of has like the Happy Birthday to Me type setup at the ending with all the dead people set up. That's when Greg shows up. They have a bit of a fight. Christy comes awake, is able to... I remember who starts out with the axe. Oh, because in the opening of the film, because this is all in the warehouse, when Greg and Josh first get to the warehouse, they find a casket full of like props, one of which is an assault rifle. So Paxton has the trocar, Greg has the rifle. He pulls the trigger, and he's like, "Blake, stupid," which I thought was funny. But one of them had an axe, ended up on the floor. Christy's able to grab it. She like lightly hits him in the back, but when he spins around, it's like pouring out of him. So that's like the bloodiest kill. So again, we have the opening with Christy's dad, Josh, Christy's mother, Paul's dad. That's only, and then Bill Paxton. So five on-screen deaths. Bill Paxton falls dead, and then we kind of get your typical early 80s surprise ending, which is somehow Paul's mother didn't really commit suicide. I guess he faked her death somehow and then induced her into a coma, kind of like how he sedated Christy. I'm guessing so that Christy's dad couldn't put her away at the institution again. Because even one thing he says is to his mother when he's got everything set up is like, "I kept my end of the promise. I made sure you wouldn't go back to the institute." So I'm guessing he faked her suicide and was able to sort of keep her in this catatonic state. But as they're hugging, the camera pans over to her and she just kind of like wakes up, screams with the knife. The sound is like that she freeze frame, and then we get Mozart for the end credits. I mean, the biggest highlight of the film is Bill Paxton. I mean, whether it's seeing him as the shy, weird kid, or when he goes almost full-on Jim Carrey at the end when he's revealed as the killer. And again, I would have loved to see a movie with his character in this, both good and bad. That would have been amazing. Sadly, passed away in, I think, 2017. May he rest in peace. Such a fun character actor, especially in these 80s horror films. Yeah, not all the acting is the greatest, but aside from Bill Paxton, I mean, you had Christopher George, who was awesome. There was Alvy Moore, and I know I've seen a movie with him in it. I know I've reviewed it because I've said his name, and I remember his Wikipedia picture, but for the life of me, I can't remember which one it was. He's only in one scene. Mary McDonough as the lead, she was okay. I mean, David Wallace was certainly the worst performance. Other than these three friends that they go to see at the skating rink, where it seems like they live at the skate rink, they were pretty obnoxious. But I really like the idea of the killer being associated with the mortuary in some way, even before we find out who it is. And his signature weapon is a trocar. I thought that was really cool. Seeing the blood come out of the back hose. And yeah, I don't think it was meant to be a mystery. I don't think we were supposed to really keep guessing who the killer was. Especially, I mean, since actually even earlier, because a lot of times we see the killer, it's like either from afar or like a very quick kind of like you see it, then he turns away. So maybe then, but certainly at the Christie open the window scene, even through the makeup, you could tell it's Bill Paxton. I mean, maybe back then when he wasn't super well known, maybe it was a surprise. And then all the information we get leading up to it, like his past and explaining his crush and how deep it was, you know, I don't think it was meant to be this huge mystery. I think the twist is that his mother wasn't dead the whole time. I think it was just supposed to be a slow reveal for the characters. But, you know, it did bother me. It's lower body count, or it's not very bloody kills, other than, you know, it coming out of the trocar hose. Or Christie's mother's death. I mean, you do see him kind of twisted around at her stomach. It's kind of a decent effect. But yeah, Bill Paxton's death is the bloodiest. I mean, it's almost just like gushing out of him. But I was into the story enough that is lower body count, lack of, you know, a lot, no, not a super gory film. You know, I forgave it enough. I was invested in the story enough. I liked the movie enough that, you know, it not being very slashery didn't really bother me. And again, of all the ones that do focus more on story and character, this probably is one of the better ones. The only thing I'll say that would have helped it, certainly, was more Bill Paxton. And I think the reason why he's only in like 3 scenes pre-reveal, like as Paul, not the killer, was so that we would really think it was him, which is a common tactic. But yeah, I enjoyed Mortuary. And of these earlier Bill Paxton roles, like Butcher Baker, Nightmare Maker, or Weird Science, you know, probably pre-Near Dark, I would say this is probably my favorite performance. It was very fun to watch him do his thing. And again, I just kept cracking up when he's in the warehouse and he's doing that. He just reminded me of Jim Carrey so much. But you could tell he was having fun. You could tell he was just reveling in this kind of psycho role. Which is too bad he didn't really get a lead in a horror film playing this kind of psycho. But, yeah. Paxton, may you rest in peace. I really enjoyed this film. I thought it was fun. And for now, that's the last of the 80s slashers that I own. I do plan on getting more. I'm not sure when. The only things I have planned so far would be the remake of Maniac. Maybe I'll go through my Renaissance slashers that I haven't done yet. Which I had done Gutterballs, but I haven't done Behind the Mask, which I love. I haven't done Stitches, which I think is really good. And I haven't done Hatchet yet either. But maybe I'll do those. But I also plan on doing, and I don't know why, but Angel's Melancholy. Only because I didn't get to it when I wanted to. But yeah. Last of the 80s slashers that I own so far. I enjoyed it. But anyway, thank you for watching.